suffering with anorexia, weighing just 6 stone at one point in her life. With this, Becky's only safe haven was her home. However, home life was not as stable as it once been. Angie later reported that during these difficult times, both Nathan and Becky would fight for attention. With this, jealousy and tension began to rise. By 2011, when Becky was 13, Angie decided to telephone the Children and Young People Services and begged for help with Becky. Angie stated that Becky was finding it difficult to go to school and was extremely anxious when leaving home. The report also stated that Becky had been described as controlling and lacking aspirations. The issues reported by Angie were never fully investigated. The local services did discuss placing Becky on the Child in Need register, but no plans were ever formed from this. Instead, Becky was asked to attend a casual meeting with a social worker. During this meeting, Becky explained in depth that she felt scared and alone. She also informed the social worker that she had spent her free time reading abduction stories and watching horror films, something that left her feeling paranoid and anxious. When briefly asked about her home life, Becky stated that Nathan was teasing her about her weight. Finally, Becky informed her social worker that a male was threatening to publish explicit photographs of her. She never identified who this male was. Due to the fact that Becky suffered from anorexia, bouts of depression and anxiety, it was decided that Becky would leave mainstream school and instead attend a hospital education service. It was here that Becky became good friends with a young girl named Courtney Picker. The pair would frequently listen to music and online shop together. Courtney described Becky as full of life and a happy person. Courtney also police decided to conduct large-scale searches of local areas such as the State George Parks and Trooper Hills Nature Reserve. They also conducted searches in open woodlands and completed house searches in Barton Hill and South Met. With little from these searches, the police then decided to complete door-to-door inquiries in the local areas, including Bad Dogs Wood and Tyrone Valley. On February 22nd, the police gave their first televised appeal to the public. They stated they just wanted to find Becky safe and well. With little information received from the appeal, it was decided the following day that Becky's father and grandmother would do a public appeal. Her father said, "Please come home. We miss you so much." By this point, #FindBecky was trending on Twitter. During the early days of the investigation, the police decided to casually interview everyone who was close to Becky, including her family members. During this, the police were able to look for anything that seemed suspicious. The main question the police needed answers from the family and friends was who had seen Becky last. On the questioning the family, Nathan and SHAUNA both reported that they were at the family home for the majority of the day. At the time, SHAUNA was acting as a carer for Angie, and so she spent a lot of time within the family home. They both also stated that they had not seen Becky, but they had heard the front door slam shut. They had assumed that Becky had left the family home. Although his stepsister was missing, police later stated that suspicion and concern had fallen on Nathan and his girlfriend when they both refused to go to the police station. Police also reported that SHAUNA would laugh and giggle throughout her interview, something that you would not typically do when hearing that a close member of the family had vanished. The police also reported that Nathan was very laid back and cracking jokes during his interview. Although both provided a detailed account of the events of the day, the police were suspicious that both of the pair had very straight and neat stories, almost like they had discussed what they had to say beforehand. However, the police had little evidence to link the pair to the disappearance of Becky. Following the interviews, the police concluded that Becky had been in the home shortly before her disappearance. With this information, they decided that a forensic team would be sent into Becky's home. During the forensic investigation, small specks of blood were found close to the doorframe of Becky's room. The most suspicious finding, though, was that the blood spatters were all at different heights, suggesting a potential struggle. Within the blood staining, the forensic team were able to find a fingerprint. By now, Becky had been missing for 9 days. Again, the police decided to bring Nathan and SHAUNA back in for questioning. They stated the reason for this was because they were significant witness to the fact that they were the last to see Becky alive. During the investigation, the police then decided to target SHAUNA, believing she was the most vulnerable. They began asking SHAUNA if Nathan had any doubts or worries about talking to the police, and asked if the investigation was harmed. SHAUNA responded that Nathan was more worried about how the investigation was affecting his mother. In a separate room, Nathan was telling the recognized as Nathan, and the blood was identified as Becky. Due to the fact that Nathan had stated that he did not like Becky and the fingerprint in her room, the pair were arrested on the suspicion of murder. During the arrest, Shauna was calm and collected and never stopped smiling. While the pair traveled to the police station, the police decided to search Nathan and Shauna's home. Inside, they found the rooms to be filthy and that the pair slept close to the kettle and toaster, so they would not have to leave their room. The lounge and kitchen were crowded and rubbish. The police did not know there was another room downstairs. Inside the bathroom, the room was filled with broken appliances, and the sink was completely covered. Shauna was further questioned and told the police that everything within the timeline of the 19th of February just felt like any other day of the family home. Shauna stuck to the story that she was in the kitchen when she heard the door slam, and following this, she had returned to the living room and watched Nathan play video games. Shauna was then asked if there was anything compelling which could aid the investigation. Shauna would pause for a short time before answering no. In a separate room, Nathan was re-interviewed. The police stated that Nathan spoke quite freely during his interview, that he wanted to be in control. He was then challenged directly by the police. Nathan remained calmed. Nathan maintained that he did not know where Becky was. Just over a mile from Becky's home, the police were at Nathan and Shauna's home and were still continuing to look through the piles of rubbish they had amassed. Although they could not find Becky anywhere, it did strike many as odd that the upstairs bath was sparkling, unlike the rest of the bathroom and house. Instantly, the question was why the bath was the only thing in this house to be recently cleaned. On the second day of the search, police then found a receipt for B&Q. The items purchased were a circular saw, face mask, and eye mask. The date on the receipt was for the day after Becky's disappearance. Tracking the time the receipt had been printed, the police were able to find CCTV of Nathan entering the B&Q. Police now believe that the reason the bath was so clean is because Becky may have been murdered and potentially dismembered in the bathtub. before strangling her for a few seconds. It was because of this abuse that the bear did as Nathan wanted. This normally involved having sex and staying in bed. It was also found that SHAUNA was pregnant at the time of Becky's disappearance. Further analysis of the couple's computers and found and the bear would watch porn together. Normally threesomes or schoolgirls. With this, the pair became obsessed and would text each other about a pretty schoolgirl they may have seen that day. In the days leading up to Becky's disappearance, the pair were watching porn multiple times a day. It was 11 days into the investigation at 10:26 p.m. when Nathan gave the police a statement through his lawyer. The police read the statement for the purpose of the tape. It stated, "I, Nathan Charles Matthew, accept I am responsible for the death of Rebecca Watts. In my car, I had a large bag, stun device, handcuffs, tape, and mask. I had developed an idea to scare Rebecca by kidnapping her. I wanted to scare her and teach her a lesson. I believe she was selfish, and her behavior towards my mother was a risk to her health." A few minutes after arriving, SHAUNA said she wanted a cigarette and went into the garden. "I went to the boot of my car and took out the bag containing the items and went upstairs to the landing before knocking on Rebecca's door. She replied, 'What?' or 'Hello?' And I said, 'Can I see you in a minute?' I cannot be sure what order things happened, but I sued the items to subdue Rebecca. During the short struggle, my mask slipped and Rebecca was able to see my face. This caused me to panic and strangle her while she was partially in the bag." Off this statement, police charged Nathan for the murder of Becky. Shortly afterwards, the police found the dismembered body of Becky within the suitcases and bags in a shed. A few hundred meters from the flat of Nathan and SHAUNA. An autopsy concluded that Becky had been stabbed 15 times after her death. Further questioning found that Nathan and SHAUNA had returned home and played Monopoly while eating a takeaway. When asked about the death of Becky, Nathan broke down in tears and said, "No comment." To every question, the only question he would answer was to state SHAUNA was not involved. Nathan maintained that SHAUNA was not involved and that SHAUNA had only found the day before Nathan had confessed. It was during her interview that SHAUNA stated that she had not been near Becky's body and that they wouldn't find no evidence to incriminate her. It was after this the police decided they had enough evidence to charge SHAUNA with perverting the course of justice. It was also during this the police uncovered messages between the couple. After reading a large quantity of texts, the police uncovered that both individuals were guilty of messaging about kidnapping a schoolgirl and keeping her within their loft. When presented with these conspiracy to kidnap, perverting the course of justice, and preventing a burial. Two other men, Donovan Demetrius and James Ireland, were also arrested and denied charges of assisting an offender. During the case, the statement made by Nathan was read to the court. Following this, the sexual history of Nathan and SHAUNA was discussed. During the trial, it came to light that the young couple had an obsession for watching threesomes online. Wanting to live out this fantasy, the couple then convinced one of their friends to join them in the threesome. During the trial, it also came to light when Becky was 8 years old. She had reported to family members that Nathan had touched her upper leg through her clothing. Furthermore, it was concluded from additional reports that Nathan was sexually fixated with Becky. This evidence was not presented in court. When asked about their relationship, Nathan said he was afraid of losing SHAUNA. In the court, he said that SHAUNA had once threatened to break up with him. At hearing this, Nathan had stabbed himself with a fork and began violently scratching his own face. With this fixation also on SHAUNA, Nathan had therefore taken all the blame for Becky's death in the hopes it would make SHAUNA look innocent. However, in court, the prosecution argued that SHAUNA had been the mastermind in the covering up of the killing. Again, during the trial, the messages between SHAUNA was read to the court. The jury also heard how 20 seconds later, Nathan had replied, "Do it." When questioned on the stand, SHAUNA said she massively regretted lying to the police and that she had made up the girl she had witnessed in the cost cutter in the hopes it would put Nathan in a happy mood. SHAUNA also commented how Nathan could make her laugh, but that he could be violent and controlling, making her beg for food and being the subject of his shouting and screaming. SHAUNA also stated that she had talked to a friend about leaving Nathan, but that she could not go through with it. She stated to the court, "I had nowhere to go. I had no one else. He would find me. It would just go back to normal if he found me." SHAUNA also told the court that she did not watch porn with Nathan and that she had no knowledge of a video being found on Nathan's laptop that showed a teenage lessons